They said she was broken. They said a wolf without a voice was better off dead. But they forgot that silence is where the loudest secrets are kept. When Elodie, the abused Omega of the Shadow Pine Pack, overheard a plan to massacre the Northern Lords, she didn't run away. She ran toward the enemy. With bleeding fingers, she carved a message into the frozen earth that would change the history of the 5 territories forever. But she wasn't expecting what came out of the mist to answer her plea. Not 1 wolf, not 2, but 30 massive white beasts led by the most feared alpha in existence, and they weren't there to negotiate. This is the true story of how the girl with no voice commanded an army without speaking a single word. The winter of 2019 was recorded as the harshest season to ever hit the territory surrounding Holloway Creek. The locals in the human town just south of the tree line called it the White Death, but for the werewolf pack hidden deep within the forested ridges of Mount Vane, it was just another Tuesday under the tyranny of Alpha Brock. For Elodie, the cold was the only thing that numbed the pain in her hands. At 22 years old, Elodie was a ghost in her own home. She was an Omega, but even that title felt too generous for how she was treated. She was the mute of Mount Vane. She hadn't spoken a word since the night her parents died in a suspicious car accident on Route 9. A tragedy that conveniently left a young, aggressive Brock in charge of the pack finances and territory. Elodie scrubbed the industrial-sized pots in the pack house kitchen, the steel wool biting into her raw fingertips. The water was freezing. Hot water was a luxury reserved for the ranked wolves, not for the girl who slept in the pantry. "You missed a spot, Mute." The voice belonged to Lila, a high-ranking Delta female who had once been Elodie's childhood friend before the hierarchy stripped the kindness out of her. Lila kicked the bucket of dirty water over soaking Elodie's canvas sneakers. Elodie didn't flinch. She didn't look up. She simply grabbed the rag and began to sop up the mess. This was her survival mechanism: become invisible. If you don't react, they get bored. If you don't speak, they think you're stupid. And if they think you're stupid, they say things in front of you that they shouldn't. It was 3 a.m. when the kitchen finally cleared out. Elodie was supposed to head to her pantry cot, but the heavy oak door to the Alpha's office located just down the service hallway was slightly ajar. Most wolves would have smelled the cigar smoke and run the other way. Alpha Brock's scent, burnt sage and rotting pine, was enough to trigger a fight-or-flight response in anyone. But Elodie heard a name that made her freeze: Kalen. Kalen was the alpha of the Ghost River Pack, the Northern Alliance of White Wolves. They were legends myths to some. They controlled the snowy tundra beyond the pass. They were known for 2 things: their brutal justice and their absolute isolation. Elodie pressed herself flat against the cold hallway wall, holding her breath. "The treaty is set for dawn." Alpha Brock's voice rumbled thick with whiskey. "At the frozen lake border." "And you're sure he'll come alone?" another voice asked. It was Jared, the pack beta, a man known for his slimy tactics. "Kalen is arrogant," Brock sneered. "He thinks he's untouchable because of that white coat and that ancient bloodline. He thinks we're meeting to trade for grain roots. He's bringing his guard down." Elodie's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "So the plan remains?" Jared asked. "The snipers are in position. Silver nitrate rounds." Brock confirmed, the sound of glass clinking against a desk following his words. "The moment Kalen steps onto the ice to shake my hand, we drop him. With the White Wolf dead, the Northern Territories fall into chaos. We move in, take their women, take their resources, and burn their dens. Elodie covered her mouth with both hands to stifle a gasp. This wasn't a skirmish. This was a war crime. The Ghost River Pack had kept the peace for 50 years. If Brock killed Kaelin, the retaliation from the north wouldn't just wipe out the fighters, it would destroy everyone. The pups, the elders, the omegas. Holloway Creek would run red. He won't see it coming. Jared laughed, a dark, wet sound. Sunrise, the end of the Ghost King. Elodie slid backward, her socks silent on the linoleum. She had to do something. But what? She couldn't speak. She couldn't mind-link. Her wolf had been dormant, buried under years of trauma and malnutrition. She had no phone, no money, and no allies. She reached the pantry and grabbed her thin, moth-eaten coat. She pulled on her wet sneakers. She didn't have a voice, but she had legs. The distance from the pack house to the frozen lake border was 15 miles through dense, uncleared forest. A ranked wolf could run it in an hour. In human form, through 2 feet of snow, it was a death sentence. Elodie opened the back door. The wind hit her like a physical blow, screaming through the pines at 40 miles per hour. It was 20 degrees below zero. She looked back at the warm, yellow light of the kitchen. If she stayed, she lived another day of misery. If she left, she likely died in the snow. But if she didn't try, thousands would die at dawn. Elodie stepped into the dark. The first 5 miles were adrenaline. The next 5 were agony. Elodie's body was shutting down. Her wet sneakers had frozen solid around her feet, feeling like blocks of concrete. The wind had whipped her cheeks raw, and her eyelashes were heavy with ice. She navigated by the stars the way her father had taught her before the accident. Keep the North Star on your left shoulder to hit the lake. The woods of Mount Vane were treacherous. Ravines were hidden under snowdrifts. Twice Elodie fell waist-deep into powder, screaming silently as the cold shocked her system. She dragged herself out by clawing at tree roots, her fingernails tearing, bleeding into the white snow. Must keep moving. By the time the sky began to turn a bruised purple, signaling the approach of dawn, Elodie was crawling. She could no longer feel her legs. She was dragging her body using her elbows, her breath coming in ragged, shallow wheezes. She crested the final ridge. Below her lay the frozen lake. It was a massive expanse of ice, a natural no-man's land between the Shadow Pine territory and the Ghost River lands. It was empty. Panic surged through her. Was she too late or too early? She scanned the tree line on her side, the Shadow Pine side. She couldn't see them, but she knew they were there. Brock's snipers, hidden in the branches' scopes trained on the center of the lake, waiting for the target. If she ran out onto the ice waving her arms, the snipers would shoot her before she made it 10 yards. Brock would claim she was a rogue or a madness victim. She needed a signal that Kaelin could see from the other side. Something undeniable. She looked at the vast, pristine, white canvas of the frozen lake. Elodie scrambled down the embankment, sliding on the ice. She hid behind a large boulder near the shore. She looked at her hands. They were blue, trembling uncontrollably. She needed contrast. She spotted a jagged piece of slate rock jutting out of the frozen mud. Without hesitating, Elodie grabbed the rock. She squeezed her eyes shut and sliced the sharp edge across her left palm. The pain was blinding, sharp and hot, a stark contrast to the freezing cold. Dark crimson blood welled up immediately. She didn't cry out. She didn't have the time. Elodie ran out from behind the boulder. She stayed low, crouching near the edge of the ice where the snipers might have a harder time spotting her through the morning mist. She plunged her bleeding hand into the snow. D. She ran a few feet. O. More blood. She squeezed her fist to make it flow faster. N. T. She was getting dizzy. The blood loss combined with the hypothermia was making the world tilt. She moved to the line below. T-R-A-P, don't trap. It wasn't enough. It wasn't clear. She needed one more word. A universal symbol. She ran forward further onto the ice, exposing herself. She dropped to her knees. She used both hands now, smearing the crimson life force onto the ice. She drew a massive X. Then she drew the symbol of the shadow pine pack, a tree, and slashed a line through it. Crack! A gunshot echoed through the valley. The bullet didn't hit her, but it shattered the ice 3 feet to her left, sending shards flying into her face. The snipers had seen her. "Get her!" a voice roared from the tree line. It was Jared. Elodie tried to stand, but her legs finally gave out. She collapsed onto the ice, right in the center of her bloody warning. She curled into a ball, waiting for the second shot. She heard the heavy thud of boots running on the ice. Jared and 2 enforcers were sprinting toward her, weapons drawn. They were going to kill her and kick snow over the warning before Kalen arrived. "Stupid mute bitch!" Jared screamed, raising his rifle butt to smash her skull in. Elodie closed her eyes. I tried. The ground didn't just shake. It vibrated with a frequency that rattled teeth. Jared froze his weapon mid-swing. The mist on the far side of the lake, the northern side, began to swirl violently. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees in a single second. From the white fog, 2 eyes appeared, glowing gold like molten coins. Then a snout, massive, scarred. Then shoulders that seemed as wide as a truck. A wolf, a pure white wolf, standing nearly 7 feet tall at the shoulder. It was monstrous, beautiful, and terrifying. It wasn't alone. To its left, 5 more white wolves stepped out. To its right, 5 more. 10. 20. 30. 30 massive white wolves emerged from the dawn mist, forming a phalanx of muscle and teeth. They moved in perfect silence, which was scarier than any growl. Jared and his 2 enforcers stumbled back, their boots slipping on the ice. They were average-sized wolves. Compared to the Ghost River giants, they looked like puppies. The lead wolf, the one with the golden eyes, looked down at the red letters carved in the snow. He sniffed the air. He smelled the message. He smelled the deceit. And then his gaze locked onto the small, broken girl, curled up in the middle of the blood. He let out a sound that wasn't a howl. It was a command. The 30 wolves surged forward. Jared screamed as he turned to run, but he was too slow. The white tide engulfed the ice. But they didn't go for the throat immediately. They circled. They formed a protective ring around Elodie. 30 beasts facing outward, snarling at the shadow pine tree line. The lead wolf, the alpha, stepped into the center of the circle. He loomed over Elodie. She looked up, her vision fading to black. She expected him to kill her. Instead, the massive beast lowered his head. He nudged her freezing cheek with his wet nose. A spark of electricity, hot blue and agonizingly intense, shot through Elodie's body. It was the bond. The alpha shifted. The sound of bones cracking filled the air, and seconds later, a man stood there. He was naked, steam rising from his skin in the freezing air. He had hair like white gold, and a scar running through his eyebrow. He didn't care about the snipers. He didn't care about the cold. He knelt and scooped Elodie up into his arms, as if she weighed nothing. "Hold fire!" Jared screamed to the hidden snipers, terrified. "Do not shoot!" "That's Kalen. That's the Ghost King." Kalen looked directly at Jared. His voice carried across the ice like thunder. "Tell Brock." Kalen said, his eyes burning with a murderous promise, that he just lost his only leverage. "And tell him I'm keeping her." Elodie's head lolled against Kalen's chest. The last thing she felt was the incredible warmth radiating from him, and the rhythmic beat of a heart that sounded strangely like her own before the darkness finally took her. Waking up felt like rising from the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. The first thing Elodie registered was the smell. It didn't smell like mildew and bleach, the signature scents of the Shadow Pine pantry. It smelled of cedar fireplace smoke and something distinctly masculine, rain and ozone. She opened her eyes. She was lying in a bed that was larger than her entire room back home. The sheets were silk grey and soft. The room was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a landscape she didn't recognize, jagged snow-capped mountains that pierced the clouds. She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in her hand stopped her. She looked down. Her hands were bandaged in thick white gauze. "Don't move." The frostbite was deep. Elodie flinched and looked towards the corner of the room. A man was sitting in a leather armchair, reading a thick leather-bound book. It was him, the man from the ice, Kalen. He was dressed now, wearing a dark grey thermal shirt and tactical pants. He looked even bigger in the confines of the room than he had on the lake. He closed the book and stood up. Elodie instinctively scrambled backward, pressing her back against the headboard. She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. It was a habit, a defense. Kalen stopped. He raised his hands slowly, showing her his palms. "I'm not going to hurt you." His voice was deep, resonating in her chest. "You're in the Ghost River Citadel," he explained, keeping his distance. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. My healers, Dr. Aris and his team, barely managed to save your fingers." Elodie stared at him. She wanted to ask why he had saved her. She wanted to tell him about the snipers. She wanted to thank him. But her throat was a locked vault. She opened her mouth, but only a dry rasp came out. Kalen's eyes narrowed slightly. He took a step closer. "Can you speak?" Elodie shook her head. "No." "Is it a physical injury?" he asked, his tone shifting from commanding to clinical. Elodie shrugged. She didn't know. She just knew that since the accident, the words wouldn't come. Kalen studied her. "Do you have a name?" Elodie hesitated. Then she reached for a glass of water on the nightstand. She dipped her bandaged index finger into the water and wrote on the dark wood of the table, Elodie. Elodie. Kalen tested the name. It sounded like a prayer coming from his lips. "I am Kalen, alpha of this pack." He walked to the window, looking out at his territory. "You saved my life, Elodie, and the lives of 30 of my best warriors. That warning in the snow, you bled for us." "Why?" Elodie looked around the room. She needed a pen. She saw a notepad on the desk. She pointed to it. Kalen brought it to her along with a pen. She wrote her handwriting, "Shaky Brock was going to kill you." It wasn't a parley. It was an execution. I couldn't let it happen. Kalen read the note. His jaw tightened. "I suspected Brock had no honor. I didn't realize he had no soul. He looked at her intently. You are from his pack. You are a traitor to them now. You can never go back. Elodie wrote, I had nothing there to go back to. You have something here, Kaelin said, his voice dropping an octave. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with that same static electricity she had felt on the ice. He sat on the edge of the bed. It was a breach of personal space, but Elodie didn't pull away. Her wolf, usually so dormant, was scratching at the surface of her mind, purring. Mate, it whispered. Kaelin seemed to be fighting an internal battle. He reached out and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. You are safe here, Elodie. No one touches you without my permission. You are under my personal protection. The door burst open. A tall, striking woman with sharp features and red hair marched in. She wore the uniform of the Ghost River Guard. This was Soraya Kaelin's second-in-command. Alpha, Soraya said, her eyes darting to Elodie with suspicion. We have a problem. Brock has contacted the council. He claims we kidnapped a mentally unstable pack member and is demanding her return. He says she is his property. Kaelin stood up, the tenderness vanishing instantly. The Alpha was back. He can claim whatever he wants, Kaelin growled. He isn't getting her. He's rallying the Southern Coalition, Kaelin, Soraya warned. He's spinning a narrative that we violated the treaty. If we keep her, we go to war. Is she worth it? A mute Omega from an enemy pack. Kaelin looked back at Elodie. Elodie felt the shame burn her cheeks. She was a liability. She was going to cause the very war she tried to stop. She started to get out of bed, intending to... What surrender Kaelin's hand shot out, gently pushing her back down. He looked at Soraya, his eyes flashing gold. She is not just an Omega, Soraya. Then what is she? Soraya demanded. Kaelin's gaze held Elodie's captive. She is the one who warned us, and... He paused, the weight of the confession hanging in the air. She is my mate. Soraya gasped. Elodie stopped breathing. But, Kaelin continued, his voice hardening, we cannot claim the bond yet. If Brock knows she is my fated mate, he won't just want her back. He will hunt her to the ends of the earth to hurt me. To the world she is a guest, a witness. Do you understand, Soraya? Yes, Alpha. Soraya said, bowing her head, though her eyes lingered on Elodie with a mix of awe and pity. Strengthen the perimeter, Kaelin ordered. If a single shadow pine wolf crosses the river, kill them. As Soraya left, Elodie looked at Kaelin. She wrote on the pad, You don't have to do this. I'm nobody. Kaelin took the pen from her hand. He leaned in close, his forehead resting against hers. You are everything, he whispered. And I am going to find out why you lost your voice. Because when you finally speak, Elodie, I want to be the first thing you name. But secrets in the werewolf world are like blood in the water, and back at Shadow Pine Alpha, Brock was digging through old files about a car accident on Route 9, and a little girl who shouldn't have survived. He realized Elodie wasn't just a mute servant. She was the loose end he should have cut years ago. And now he was coming to finish the job. The recovery process was slow, a torture of thawing nerves and returning sensation. For the first week, Elodie was confined to the medical wing of the Ghost River Citadel, a facility that looked more like a high-end Swiss research lab than a werewolf infirmary. Dr. Aris Pendergast, the head healer, was a man of infinite patience. He was an older wolf with spectacles and a scent of antiseptic and peppermint. He had spent hours examining Elodie's throat with advanced imaging technology. Physically, "There is nothing wrong with your vocal cords, Elodie," Dr. Aris said one afternoon, swiping through holographic scans on his tablet. "The paralysis is psychogenic, trauma-induced mutism. Your mind has built a wall around your voice to protect you from something you're not ready to remember." Elodie sat on the edge of the examination table, her legs swinging freely. She wore clothes Kaelin had provided: thick wool sweaters, tactical leggings, and fur-lined boots. She felt like an imposter in them. She picked up the tablet Kaelin had given her, a device to replace her notepad, and typed, "I don't want to remember." Dr. Aris sighed, cleaning his glasses. "Sometimes the body remembers what the mind forgets, and until you face it, that wall will stand." Kaelin visited every evening. He never came empty-handed. Sometimes it was food, venison stew, fresh bread, dark chocolate, and other times it was books from the Citadel's vast library. He had quickly realized Elodie was not uneducated. She had devoured books in the Shadow Pine attic during her years of solitude. On the 7th night, Kaelin didn't bring a book. He brought a summons. He stood by the door, his massive frame blocking the light from the hallway. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his golden eyes, and his jaw was covered in a day's growth of stubble. "The Council of the 5 Territories has convened," Kaelin said, his voice gravelly. "Brock has formally accused me of kidnapping. He claims you are mentally incompetent and that I abducted you to extract pack secrets. He's demanding a hearing at the neutral lands." Elodie typed rapidly. "He's lying. I'll tell them." "I know he's lying," Kaelin said, walking over to sit beside her. The mattress dipped under his weight. "But the Council is old-fashioned. They fear war more than they love justice. Brock is threatening to cut off the lumber supply to the southern cities if you aren't returned. He's squeezing them economically." Elodie felt a cold knot of guilt tighten in her stomach. She was causing trouble just by existing. "I have to go," Kaelin said. "I leave at dawn for the hearing. Soraya will stay here with you. You are not to leave the Citadel, Elodie. The perimeter is secure, but Brock has hired mercenaries. The Red Hand Guild." Elodie froze. The Red Hand? They were myths, boogeymen told to pups to make them behave. Assassins who didn't just kill. They erased people. She grabbed Kaelin's arm. Her eyes were wide, pleading. "Don't go. It's a trap." Kaelin looked down at her hand on his arm. He covered it with his own large, warm hand. The sparks of the mate bond danced between their skin, a comforting hum that made Elodie's heart race. "I have to," he said softly. "If I don't, they will sanction the Ghost River Pack. My people will starve. I am the Alpha. I take the risk so they don't have to." He stood up and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "If I don't come back, there is a safe in my office. The code is your birthday. Inside there are papers giving you a new identity and enough money to disappear to the human world. Soraya knows the plan." Elodie watched him leave, her heart breaking. He was walking into a lion's den for her. The next 2 days were a blur of anxiety. Elodie spent her time pacing the Alpha's quarters, which she had been moved to for better security. Soraya posted guards at every entrance, hulking white wolves with semi-automatic rifles slung across their chests. To distract herself, Elodie began to explore Kaelin's office. It was a sanctuary of dark wood and maps. She traced her fingers over the strategic maps of the 5 territories. She saw the Ghost River lands, vast and white. She saw Shadow Pine, a dark blotch to the south. Then she found a file on the desk. It was labeled Project Route 9, 2004. 2004, the year her parents died. Elodie's breath hitched. Why did Kaylin have a file on her parents' accident? She opened it. Inside there were no police reports. Instead there were photos. Grainy black and white surveillance photos taken from the woods near the crash site. One photo showed the mangled wreckage of her father's sedan. The next photo showed a man standing over the wreckage holding a gas can. Elodie brought the photo closer to the light. The man was younger, leaner, but the sneer was unmistakable. Jared. And behind him, watching from a black SUV, was a man in a trench coat. Councillor Varric Lowen. Elodie dropped the file. Her hands shook violently. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just Brock. The council was involved. Varric Lowen, the high seat of the council, the very man presiding over Kaylin's hearing right now, was there the night her parents were murdered. Kaylin wasn't walking into a hearing. He was walking into an execution presided over by the man who helped kill her family. Elodie ran to the door and banged on it. Soraya opened it instantly. "What is it?" Elodie shoved the photo into Soraya's chest. Soraya looked at it, her eyes widening. "Varric," Soraya hissed. "That snake. He's the judge for the hearing." Elodie typed on her tablet, her fingers flying. "Kaylin is walking into a trap. Varric and Brock are working together. We have to warn him. Comms are jammed." Soraya said, her face pale. "We've been trying to reach the Alpha's convoy for an hour. I thought it was just the mountain interference, but we have to go," Elodie typed. "I can't," Soraya argued. "My orders are to keep you here. If I take you out there and you get hurt, Kaylin will skin me alive." Elodie grabbed Soraya's tactical vest and yanked her down to eye level. Her eyes were fierce, burning with a fire that hadn't been there a week ago. She typed one word, Alpha. She wasn't asking. She was commanding. For a split second, Elodie wasn't the mute Omega. She was the mate of the Ghost King, and her authority flared like a beacon. Soraya blinked, stunned by the sudden display of dominance. She straightened up and nodded. "Gear up," Soraya said. "We're taking the helicopter." The neutral lands were a valley located between the three major territories. In the center stood the Peace Hall, a massive stone structure that dated back to the First War. Inside the main chamber, the atmosphere was suffocating. Kaylin stood in the center of the circular room. His hands were cuffed with silver-laced dampeners, preventing him from shifting. It was standard protocol for a hearing, but today the metal felt heavier than usual. Across from him sat Alpha Brock. He was wearing a bespoke suit that strained against his bulky frame. He looked smug. High above them on the stone dais sat the three councillors. In the center was Varric Lowen. He was a thin man with silver hair and eyes like polished glass. "Alpha Kaylin," Varric's voice echoed through the chamber. "The evidence presented by Alpha Brock is damning. You were seen crossing the border. You were seen taking the girl. You admit to harboring her. I admit to saving her." Kaylin argued, his voice calm but dangerous. "She was being abused. She warned me of an assassination attempt." "An assassination attempt?" Varric raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof?" "The girl is the proof," Kaylin said. "Let her speak." "The girl is a mute mental patient," Brock interjected smoothly. "She has delusions. She draws pictures in the snow. Is that your star witness, Kaylin? A broken toy?" "She is my mate," Kaylin roared. The room went silent. The murmurs of the gathered gallery representatives from other packs stopped abruptly. Varric leaned forward. "A convenient claim. But even if she is your mate, You violated the Treaty of Borders to get her. The law is clear. The penalty for breaking the treaty is death or exile." Kaelin struggled against the cuffs. "You're rushing this, Varric. Why? The council has deliberated." Varric ignored him, picking up a wooden gavel. "Alpha Kaelin of Ghost River is found guilty of treaty violation, kidnapping, and acts of aggression. The sentence is immediate execution." The gallery exploded in shouts. This was unheard of. Alphas weren't executed. They were fined or challenged. "Guards," Varric ordered. 12 men in black tactical gear stepped out from the shadows of the pillars. They weren't council guards. They wore the insignia of the Red Hand. Brock stood up and smiled. "Goodbye, Ghost King." The Red Hand mercenaries raised their weapons. Whoop, 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 whoop. The sound of rotor blades screaming overhead drowned out the room. The stained glass skylight of the Peace Hall shattered inward in a rain of colorful shards. A black tactical helicopter hovered right above the hole in the roof. Ropes dropped. Soraya and 4 Ghost River elites rappelled down, guns blazing. "Protect the Alpha!" Soraya screamed. Chaos erupted. The gallery attendees scrambled for the exits. The Red Hand mercenaries opened fire on the Ghost River team. Kaelin used the distraction. He snapped his wrists outward with catastrophic force. The silver cuffs groaned the metal warping, but they didn't break. He was defenseless. A mercenary aimed a shotgun at Kaelin's chest. Suddenly, a small figure dropped from the last rope, not sliding with professional grace, but falling with reckless desperation. It was Elodie. She landed hard on the stone table in front of the judges, rolling to absorb the impact. She stood up, glass crunching under her boots. She looked directly at Varric Lowen. Varric's eyes went wide. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. "You," Varric whispered. Elodie didn't have a weapon. She pulled the file from her jacket, the file from Kaelin's office, and slammed it onto the table. The photos spilled out, the photos of Varric at the crash site. Brock saw the photos. His face went purple. "Kill her. Kill her now." The mercenary with the shotgun swung his aim toward Elodie. Kaelin roared, a sound of pure primal panic. "No!" Elodie didn't run. She turned to face the mercenary. She opened her mouth. The blockage in her throat, the psychological dam that had held back her voice for 15 years, cracked under the pressure of the mate bond. She wasn't saving herself. She was saving Kaelin. She didn't speak. She screamed. But it wasn't a human scream. "Kneel." The voice that tore from her throat was deeper than the ocean, resonant with a power that shook the stone foundations of the hall. It was an alpha command, but amplified. It was the voice of a true alpha, a lineage thought extinct. The power of the command hit the room like a physical shockwave. The mercenary with the shotgun dropped to his knees instantly, his eyes rolling back in his head. Brock caught off guard, buckled his knees, hitting the floor with a crack. Even Soraya and the Ghost River wolves stumbled. Only Kaelin remained standing, though he swayed. Elodie stood on the table chest, heaving blood trickling from her nose. The silence she had kept for years had been a dam holding back an ocean of power. She wasn't just an Omega. She never was. Varric Lowen was trembling, gripping the arms of his chair. He wasn't kneeling. He was fighting it with everything he had. "Impossible," Varric gasped. "The Valerius bloodline. We ended it." Elodie turned her gaze to Varric. Her eyes, usually a soft brown, were now glowing a violent, luminous violet. "You missed one," Elodie rasped. Her voice was raw, unused, but clear. Kaelin looked at her, awe and terror warring in his eyes. Valerius. the ancient royal line of the wolves, the kings and queens who had ruled all 5 territories before the council overthrew them in a coup 2 decades ago. Elodie's parents weren't just random wolves. They were the king and queen in hiding. And Elodie was the lost princess. Brock fought against the command foam forming at his mouth. "She's an abomination. Kill it." He forced himself up, shifting into his massive black wolf form, resisting the command through sheer rage. He lunged at Elodie, jaws snapping for her neck. Elodie was exhausted. The scream had drained her. She raised her arm to block the bite, squeezing her eyes shut. A blur of white fur intercepted the black beast. Kalen had broken the cuffs. The sight of his mate in danger had given him the hysterical strength to shatter reinforced steel. He slammed into Brock mid-air, tackling him away from the dais. The 2 alphas crashed into the stone floor, a tangle of fur and teeth. "Get her out of here!" Kalen bellowed in human tongue before shifting into his massive white wolf form. Soraya grabbed Elodie. "We have to go! We're outnumbered!" More Red Hand mercenaries were pouring in through the side doors. The surprise of the voice was wearing off. "I'm not leaving him." Elodie cried out, her voice cracking. It was the first time she had spoken a sentence in 15 years. "He's buying us time," Soraya yelled, dragging Elodie toward the ropes. "If they catch you, they kill the rebellion before it starts. You are the Valerius heir. You are the revolution." Elodie looked back. Kalen was fighting 3 wolves at once. He was bleeding from deep gashes in his flank. He locked eyes with her for a fleeting second. "Go," his voice echoed in her head. "Live." Soraya clipped Elodie to the harness and signaled the pilot. The helicopter jerked upward, pulling Elodie into the sky. She watched as the Peace Hall shrank below her. She watched the flashes of gunfire. She watched the place where she had found her voice, only to lose her heart. They flew north, back toward the ice, back toward the only safety left in a world that had suddenly become very small and very dangerous. Elodie touched her throat. The silence was gone, but now the noise of war was beginning. The helicopter ride back to the Ghost River Citadel was a descent into a different kind of silence, a heavy, suffocating silence, born of grief and shock. Elodie sat strapped into the jump seat, her hands trembling not from cold, but from the aftershocks of the power that had torn through her throat. Every time she swallowed, it tasted like copper and ozone. When they landed on the helipad, the Citadel was already in an uproar. News of the Peace Hall ambush had traveled fast. Hundreds of white wolves were gathered in the courtyard, their breath misting in the freezing air, their golden eyes wide with panic. They sensed their alpha was in danger. They sensed the bond had been stretched, though not broken. Soraya helped Elodie down. The beta female looked ragged, her red hair matted with blood that wasn't hers. "Listen to me," Soraya shouted to the gathering crowd, trying to establish order. "Alpha Kalen has been detained by the Council. We are initiating Protocol Lockdown. We will seal the mountain passes and— no." The word cut through the wind like a whip. It wasn't shouted, but it carried a resonance that made the nearest wolves flinch. Elodie stepped forward. She pushed Soraya's hand away. She stood at the edge of the platform, looking down at the sea of white wolves, the most lethal pack in the north. "We are not locking down," Elodie said. Her voice was raspy, hurting her to use, but she forced the volume up. "We are going to war." A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. They knew her only as the mute refugee, the girl Kalen had saved. Who was she to give orders? An elder wolf, a massive male, named Thorin, stepped forward. "You are a guest here, girl. You do not command the Ghost River Pack. Without Kaelin, we must protect the territory. That is the law." Elodie looked at Thorin. She felt the heat rising in her chest again, that violet fire that had been dormant since childhood. She remembered her father's voice. She remembered her mother's lessons. They obey strength, Elodie, but they follow lineage. She closed her eyes for a second, summoning the image of Kaelin fighting alone on that marble floor. Kaelin, who had looked at her broken, silent self and seen a queen. Elodie opened her eyes. They weren't brown anymore. They were blazing with a supernatural ultraviolet light that illuminated the falling snow around her. She let the suppression walls in her mind crumble completely. Her scent changed. It wasn't just the scent of an omega or a mate. It was the scent of petrichor and iron, the ancient scent of the Valerius bloodline. "I am not a guest." Elodie projected her voice, and this time the alpha command laced every syllable. "I am Elodie Valerius, daughter of King Magnus, the rightful heir to the 5 territories." The name hit the crowd like a physical blow. The older wolves like Thorin went pale. They remembered the reign of Magnus. They remembered the peace before the council took over. "Brock and Varric Lowen killed my family." Elodie continued walking down the stairs toward them. The wolves parted for her, lowering their heads instinctively. "They stole my voice. They stole your freedom. And now they have taken your alpha." She stopped in front of Thorin. The massive wolf was trembling, his instincts warring with his logic. "Kaelin fought for me when I could not speak," Elodie said, her voice softening just enough to show the heartbreak beneath the command. "Now I will speak for him. I am going to Shadow Pine to burn it to the ground. Who walks with me?" Thorin stared into her violet eyes. He saw the truth there. He saw the ancient power that the council had tried to extinguish. Slowly, solemnly, Thorin dropped to one knee. He bowed his head, baring his neck in submission. "Hail the Queen," Thorin rumbled. It started as a ripple and became a wave. Soraya knelt. The guards knelt. Within seconds, 300 white wolves were bowing in the snow before the girl who had scrubbed floors only weeks ago. Elodie didn't smile. There was no joy in this. There was only duty. "Soraya," Elodie commanded, "open the armory. I want every wolf armed. I want the trucks loaded. And get me a radio. I have a message for Brock." 2 hours later, a convoy of 50 armored trucks and 300 wolves tore out of the Ghost River gates. They didn't move with the stealth of the white wolves. They moved with the thunder of an invading army. Elodie sat in the lead vehicle, an assault rifle resting against her knee. She held a long-range radio microphone in her hand. Soraya had patched it into the emergency frequency, a channel that every Alpha and Council member monitored. Elodie pressed the button. "Alpha Brock," she said. Her voice was calm, cold, and terrifyingly clear. Static crackled, and then Brock's voice came through, sounding breathless and angry. "You have some nerve, little mute. Come to beg for his life. I have him hanging by silver hooks in my cellar." Elodie's heart seized, but she didn't waver. "I'm not coming to beg Brock," she said. "I'm coming to take back what is mine." "You have no army." Brock laughed, though it sounded strained. "You have a pack of leaderless snow dogs." "Look out your window," Elodie said. She signaled Soraya. On the ridge overlooking the Shadow Pine Valley, the convoy came to a halt. At Elodie's signal, 300 wolves howled in unison, a sound so loud it shook the snow from the trees in the valley below. Then they fired the flares. Hundreds of red flares arced into the twilight sky, painting the snow the color of blood. It was the same red message she had carved into the ice. "I am here." "I suggest you run," Elodie whispered into the radio. "But even if you do, I will find you." The Battle of Shadow Pine was not a skirmish. It was a reckoning. Elodie's convoy smashed through the perimeter gates of the Shadow Pine compound. The Red Hand mercenaries were waiting entrenched behind sandbags and armored SUVs. Gunfire erupted, lighting up the night. "Forward!" Soraya screamed, leading the vanguard. The white wolves shifted, moving like ghosts through the hail of bullets. They were faster, stronger, and angrier than the hired guns. Elodie didn't stay in the truck. She jumped out, flanked by Thorin and 2 other royal guards. She didn't have her wolf form. The trauma had buried her animal spirit deep, but she had something more dangerous. A mercenary ran at her with a machete. "Sleep," Elodie commanded. The mercenary collapsed mid-stride, hitting the ground in a heap, instantly unconscious. She moved through the battlefield like a wraith. Every time a Shadow Pine wolf lunged at her, she used the voice. "Halt! Yield! Submit!" Shadow Pine wolves bound to obey an alpha found themselves paralyzed by the command of a queen. They whimpered, fighting their own bodies, but the Valerius blood was absolute. They dropped their weapons. They lay on their bellies. Elodie walked a path of unconditional surrender, stepping over the prone bodies of her enemies. She reached the main pack house, the place where she had suffered for years. The kitchen door was hanging off its hinges. She walked through the hallway where she had once heard the secret plot. She descended the stairs to the basement dungeon. The smell of silver and burning flesh was thick here. "Kaelin!" she screamed. "Elodie!" A weak rasp answered her. She kicked open the heavy iron door. Kaelin was chained to the wall. He was a mess of blood and bruises. Silver hooks were embedded in his shoulders, suppressing his healing. Standing over him was Brock, holding a silver-tipped spear. In the corner, Councillor Varric Lowen was frantically stuffing documents into a briefcase. "One step closer, and I put this through his heart," Brock roared, pressing the spear tip against Kaelin's chest. Elodie froze. She was 20 feet away. The voice took a second to travel. If she spoke, Brock might reflexively thrust the spear before the command took hold. Kaelin lifted his head. His golden eyes were dim, but they locked onto hers. He smiled through the blood. "My queen," he whispered. "Shut up." Brock backhanded him. "Let him go, Brock," Elodie said, her voice shaking. "It's over. Your pack has surrendered. The mercenaries are dead." "It's not over until I say it is," Brock screamed, spittle flying. "I should have killed you when you were a child. I knew you were trouble. You look just like your mother." "You killed her," Elodie said, tears streaming down her face. "Why? Because the Valerius line was weak," Varric shouted from the corner, snapping his briefcase shut. "You wanted peace. You wanted to integrate with humans. We wanted power. We wanted the old ways. And look where that got you." Elodie gestured to the dank cell. "I have the Alpha of the North." Brock sneered. "I can still walk out of here. I trade him for safe passage." Elodie looked at Kaelin. Kaelin gave her a barely perceptible nod. He shifted his weight, grimacing as the silver hooks tore his flesh. "Trust me," he mouthed. Elodie took a deep breath. She looked Brock in the eye. "I deny your trade," she said, cold as ice. Brock's eyes went wide. He hadn't expected that. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, shocked by her ruthlessness. That was all Kaelin needed. He ignored the agony. He roared, his body expanding, shifting violently into his white wolf form, despite the silver. The hooks ripped out of his flesh with a sickening sound of tearing muscle. He was free. Brock tried to bring the spear down, but Kaelin was faster. He snapped his jaws around the spear shaft, shattering the wood. Then he lunged. Kaelin slammed Brock into the stone wall. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Kaelin's rage was a physical force. Varric tried to run for the door. Elodie turned to the corrupt counselor. She didn't shout this time. She whispered, and the magic carried it straight to his ear. "Freeze!" Varric turned to stone 1 foot in the air, his face a mask of terror. Elodie walked over to him. She took the briefcase from his frozen hand. Then she walked to Kaelin, who was standing over Brock's broken body. Kaelin shifted back to human form. He was naked, covered in blood, breathing heavily. He looked at Elodie. He fell to his knees not from weakness, but from reverence. He took her hand and pressed his bloody forehead against her palm. "You came for me," he choked out. "You came for me first," Elodie replied, falling to her knees to embrace him. She didn't care about the blood. She kissed him a desperate, searing kiss that tasted of tears and victory. The bond between them snapped into place, permanent and blindingly bright. Soraya and Thorin burst into the room, weapons raised. They stopped when they saw the scene. Brock was dead. Varric was a statue, and Elodie was holding their alpha. Thorin lowered his gun. "The South has fallen," Thorin announced. "The Council Guard has surrendered." Elodie stood up, helping Kaelin to his feet. She looked at Varric, who was still frozen, his eyes darting frantically. "Take him to the Citadel," Elodie ordered. "He will stand trial. A real trial. And then—" She looked at the ceiling toward the world above. "Then we rebuild." 6 months later. The Peace Hall had been repaired. The glass was new, depicting not just the history of the wolves, but the image of a white wolf and a girl with violet eyes. The great hall was packed. Wolves from all 5 territories, north, southeast, west, and central, were gathered. There was no council dais anymore. There was a round table. Elodie stood at the head of the table. She wore a dress of silver silk, but combat boots were visible underneath. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was active. She was reforming the trade routes, rewriting the laws, and integrating the schools. Beside her sat Kaelin. He was fully healed, though the scars on his shoulders remained a testament to his loyalty. He was her consort, her general, and her soul. "The era of silence is over," Elodie spoke into the microphone. Her voice was strong, her own no longer needing the alpha command to be heard. "We do not hide in the dark. We do not prey on the weak. We protect." She looked at the crowd. She saw Lila, her old tormentor, now working in the kitchens of the Shadow Pine Rehabilitation Center. She saw Dr. Aris. She saw Soraya. "My father once said that a wolf's power is in his teeth," Elodie said. "He was wrong. A wolf's power is in his pack." She squeezed Kaelin's hand. He squeezed back. "Long live the Queen!" Thorin shouted from the back. "Long live the Queen!" The chant shook the mountains. Elodie smiled. It was the first time she had truly smiled since she was 7 years old. She leaned into Kaelin. "Ready to go home?" she whispered. "To the Citadel?" he asked. "No," Elodie said, looking out the window at the snow-covered world. "To the lake. I want to see where we began." And as they walked out into the winter sun, 30 white wolves appeared from the tree line to escort them not as guards, but as family. The mute Omega was gone. The Wolf Queen had risen, and the warning she had drawn in the snow had been washed away, replaced by the footprints of a new dawn. What an incredible journey! From a silent, abused girl scrubbing floors to the queen of all 5 territories, Elodie's story proves that even the quietest voice can start an avalanche. She didn't just find her mate in Kaelin. She found her power, her heritage, and her justice. The way she used the Alpha Command to freeze the very men who destroyed her family was pure poetic justice. This story reminds us that trauma doesn't define us. It's how we rise from it that matters. Elodie and Kaelin showed us that loyalty is the strongest magic of all. What did you think of Elodie's hidden power? Would you have spared Varric for a trial, or let Kaelin handle him right there in the dungeon? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, share this with your pack, and subscribe for more dramatic tales. See you in the next video.